What are home prices doing? And has the seasonal market actually started to slow? Let's talk about that today as well as touch on sales volume. This is Ryan with SacramentoAppraisalBlog.com. This will be about 10 minutes. Thanks, guys. So, what are prices doing? That is the big question. And let me show you exactly how I'm tending to answer that. So here's the median price since 2014 in the Sacramento region. And as you can see, there's a seasonal element where it goes up and down, very cyclical. Well, what we're starting to see is down. And so over the past 2 months, it looks like we've begun to see a seasonal crest or a seasonal descent where the median price has softened 2 months in a row in the region. When we look at Sacramento County, we see a similar dynamic, although there was only 1 month so far from April to May where we saw prices drop slightly. Okay. But when we look at the region at different price metrics, here's the median price in blue, average sales price in pink, and average price per square foot in green. It looks like we've begun to see a seasonal descent, right? Isn't that an honest way to look at the market? Where each year we begin to see the market turn around this time of year. Now, my sense is that this year, this seasonal descent looks like it's starting 1 month earlier than usual. Okay, but when we look at Sacramento County, do you see that similar dynamic? Yeah, and so I think if someone were to say, it looks like the seasonal market is starting to, happen and we're starting to maybe go down for the second half of the year, I couldn't argue with that. Okay, but hold that thought though, because here's an interesting thing to consider. Now, take weekly price stats with a grain of salt. But one of the reasons why I'm looking by the week is because I want to get clues into the market. Now, we've had 3 weeks of June, and here's the median price in blue. And you can see over the past 3 weeks, there's actually been an uptick. It's been a very strong start to the month of June. Now, for our monthly stats here for the region, we're going to have to wait about 1 to 2 weeks to see if there will actually be an increase. But I could say if we continue to see an increase over this last week of June, price stats for June will actually increase from where they were in May. Now, that would be abnormal. We don't normally see that once prices start to slough, but we're kind of not in a very normal market right now. Okay, here's the median price in Sacramento County. Sac County has the most sales out of any local county in the region. And you can see over the past 3 weeks that we've sort of broken away from hovering between 395 and 400. And so, what will this mean for June? Look, like I said, this is preliminary. We really need 1 more week and especially 2 weeks to see the numbers, but this is interesting to see. This might be a clue into the future. All right. But in terms of prices, I would say that a lot of people have been saying, the markets felt very level or stable or very flat. And I think here's why. Because when you compare May 2019 with May 2020 in Sac County, the region, and Placer, we've seen very little price change. Okay. And so, I mean, really, when you look at these metrics in some areas, it looks like, prices are up 1 to 2%, maybe 3%. That's very modest when you consider 12 months. And it's one of the reasons why I think when we're pulling comps, sometimes you look and go, yeah, the market feels really competitive, but it doesn't look like there's that much price movement. Okay. But here's my advice. Don't put all your weight on just May. We want to look at June, we want to look at July, we want to look at April. We don't want to derive our sole narrative on the market over 1 month of data, particularly data where 94% of these sales got into contract after the pandemic. And so this is some serious, real, raw, nearly 100% pandemic market data. Okay. And so let's just keep that in mind. One more thing sort of on prices, and then I have some closing tips on prices before talking about volume. Here's the number of multiple offers in the regions from 2017 through 2020. You can see a cyclical vibe where the market in the beginning part of the year, there's more multiple offers during the spring, and then the market sloughs where there's left. But can you see this rhythm each year? And so in 2020, there were more, but then my sense is that the market sort of turned early, about 1 month earlier than it normally does. And really for the past couple months, we've seen less multiple offers. And so when a market shows its descent for the season, this is the type of stuff we see. Or last month in May, it took about 1 to 2 days longer to sell than April. And so that's another clue that it looks like the seasonal market has begun. However, look at this. In May, 47.2% of sales had more than one offer. Okay, but when you look at current pending since June 1st, 51.6% of pendings have multiple offers. Okay, and so we see this dynamic where the market among current pendings feels more competitive. And that makes sense because a week ago, we literally reached the lowest point ever that we've had for mortgage rates. And so that's like injecting a steroid into the market or giving rocket fuel, in your car. I mean, it just makes us drive really fast. Same dynamic in Sacramento County and same dynamic in Placer County. And so the question is, will this more competitive dynamic, will it make a difference in prices in the future, or will it show up stats wise? That's what we don't know, but we'll keep watching and just note that sometimes there's a disconnect between the sales and what's happening in the pendings. Okay, some quick takeaways regarding prices. I'll say that we need time to understand this. So let's keep watching the market, particularly take my weekly price stats with a grain of salt, but I hope you sort of are gleaning a little bit of perspective there. Maybe the seasonal market has started to slough. Okay, it looks like statistically that that's what's happening. It looks like the visuals are telling that story. However, maybe the seasonal market hasn't started to turn. Maybe we're going to see prices turn up. Maybe next month will show, stats that are otherwise. Okay, that's abnormal. It doesn't happen, but at the same time, we're not in a normal market due to pent up demand. All right, so we've had basically growth in pending contracts for 11 weeks now, and we've had 5 weeks in a row where we've seen more pending contracts than new listings hit in the Sacramento region. So we have this market where there's a ton of pent up demand, of course, being fueled by low mortgage rates. All right. So we'll know more with June data. As I mentioned, I can't wait to share. I'll have that video out in about 2 weeks from now, and we'll see how some of what I'm talking about pans out. Okay, in terms of volume, volume has been doing the limbo. Here's a brand new visual. Do you like this? Let me know in the comments. And by the way, if you like this video, if you're getting value, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. But you can look by the year 2014 to 2020 in all of these various locations. This is sales volume in the month of May. And when you look at the month of May, it was pretty dismal. In Sacramento County, there's 580 fewer sales. In the region, there are almost 1,000 fewer. Here's an interesting way to look at the market, though. Sales volume in 2020 was down 36.3% in May compared to 2019. And so, what this means effectively is that when we're pulling comps, there's 36.3% fewer comps to choose from in the month of May. And so that's why sometimes it's a little harder to see where the market's at because there's simply less data. Okay, here's some really good glowing news. I just updated this graph today, and for 5 weeks in a row, we've seen growth in sales volume. So I'd say sales volume was doing the limbo, and now it's sort of starting to do something else. In 2020, you can see weekly volume in blue. Okay, 2019 is red, 2018 is green. If we had a normal year in blue in 2020, our line would have gone just in line with these other ones. But we took a detour due to the pandemic, but for 5 weeks in a row, we've seen growth. And in fact, this week, it looks like we're only down about 10% from where we were in 2019 at the same time. That's a huge difference compared to 30 to 40% for a number of weeks in a row. Again, what's happening is that we're having pendings from 4 to 6 weeks ago finally close escrow. Okay, now we've been having about 800 pendings for the past couple weeks, and these 800 pendings will eventually close, probably the bulk of them in about 4 to 6 weeks from now. So I suspect that we'll continue to see this line moving up for the foreseeable future. All right, and so this is some pretty glowing news. But here's quite the stat. There have been 2,073 fewer closed sales in the region this year compared to last year since the pandemic began. So over 2,000 fewer closed sales, right? That's exactly why I think some real estate friends have tightened up their finances or they're cutting back on their expenses because they've been keenly aware that there's less deals closing in their offices. So here's some closing thoughts on looking at the market by price range. Okay, I've been getting a lot of requests. People are saying, well, what's the $1 million market doing? What's the market doing at 500,000? Well, here's a couple ideas for how I want to show this visually. So let me explain how this visual works. So here's sort of the price ranges at the bottom. And basically what this compares is April 2019 to April 2020 and May 2019 to May 2020. So April is in blue. And this figure is it says negative 32%. And it basically shows that volume was down 32% in in April 2020 compared with April 2019. Or in May is in yellow. And what this figure at 36% shows is that sales volume was down, or the number of sales was down 36% in May 2020 compared to May 2019. And so, what we want to watch are various price segments and just ask the question, are we starting to see some differences that are abnormal in different price segments? Okay, and so particularly I'd say let's watch above 750, above a million for the jumbo segments of the market. Okay, now we have very little data right now. I wouldn't be prepared to offer some real insight here other than to say, well, let's look at days on market because I have something here. So days on market in April, basically April 2020 took 11 fewer days to sell compared to 2019. So it's much more aggressive market. And in May, it took 4 fewer days to sell compared to May 2019. So we look by price range and just ask, are we seeing anything different? And the interesting thing to me is that above a million in May 2020, it took 11 days longer to sell. Now, if over time, if when I run June, July, August stats, and then everything else is taking less time to sell, but we see above a million is 11 and 15 and 20 or whatever, then maybe that's a clue that, hey, something's happening above a million. So right now we're getting just a little brief glimpse. I wouldn't write home over this, but let's continue to watch it. Okay. Inventory levels. Here's a chart that shows by the price range, basically anything below 400,000 since 2018. It is really tight. You can basically see that inventory is by about 0.75 months to maybe 1.3 months. And so there's hardly anything on the market. And that's why I think under 400 especially is very competitive as long as you're priced right. Here's the interesting thing to me, and this is Sacramento County, 500 to 750 from 2018. You can see it's very flat in orange, and then 750 to 1 million in blue. It seems very flat lately, maybe a slight uptick, but more or less flat. Now above a million on the top, this is the interesting part to me. It looks like whereas the rest of the market has maybe declined or gone flat, it looks like the trend has been a little bit different above a million. And so again, this is something to watch. It's something we want to look out for. Are we experiencing a different trend, or have we just had maybe, fewer sales above a million lately and it's making the stance wonky? Okay, so I'll just say in closing, let's watch the present and let's watch the future. Okay, there's certainly red flags on the horizon, but that doesn't change some glowing stats that we're seeing right now. Okay, I'll talk more about doom and gloom versus rose-colored glasses in a different video. Again, if you like this, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for being here. It's a real honor and privilege, and be blessed, be safe out there.